Republican leaders in the White House, the Congress, most governors, most state Republican leaders have deserted their conservative supporters and have moved left. Too many politicians have betrayed the trust of their supporters and the voters put in them. They did this to curry favor with the liberal establishment, their donors, big business, corporate America, and how appropriate that in this last election it turned into ashes in their mouth. In recent years, Washington Republicans have succeeded in destroying the Republican brand that conservatives and Ronald Reagan made so popular in America. They've done such a terrible job with this Republican brand that was handed to them that was so popular in the country, so that now today Democrats have a higher approval rating in the area of balanced budget, lower taxes, less spending, more honesty in government. I mean, you have to work really hard to mess up a brand like that. I mean, it's very, very discouraging. But it's difficult and dark and discouraging as these times are. They're also very, very exciting times. Put a little plug in my book, Conservatives Betrayed, how George W. Bush and other big government Republicans hijacked the conservative cause. I talk about how bad things are and where we are now, but I also lay out a plan of how conservatives can come to power and how we can govern America. In order to get to where we get, in order to get to the political promised land, it's important to understand who's responsible for the mess that we're in, who's caused these problems. As Jesus told us in the Bible, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So the early 60s, during the draft Goldwater days, it was very exciting times. We didn't have very much in the way of knowledge and experience. Very few of us had any experience in campaigns. But because Goldwater ran, and he ran knowing in January of 1964, he knew that he would lose that election. America was not going to have 3 presidents in a period of years. But he did it for the right reason. He did it to launch the conservative movement, to build the conservative movement. And it did accomplish that purpose. It was exciting times. We often hear about when Nelson Rockefeller was at the Republican convention speaking at the Cow Palace in San Francisco in 1964, and the boos were coming from the rafters. I was in the rafters. And I wasn't silent. Interesting enough, I did see someone else in the rafters that day. I was walking around and saw a crowd of 15, 20 people around somebody. I said, well, it must be somebody famous, celebrity. And sure enough, it was a former movie actor named Ronald Reagan. And he was an alternate delegate to that convention and was sitting there signing autographs. And 2 years later, he was going to be governor of California as a direct result of the Goldwater campaign. You can draw a straight line from the Goldwater campaign. He made a speech, so that you know, and we're all here as conservatives because Goldwater went out there and gave us a cause to fight for. So some of us begin to meet at my home once, twice, sometimes 3 times a week. Paul Wyrick, at Fulner, the Heritage Foundation, and half a dozen others. Anyway, we begin to do what Hillary would refer to maybe as the vast right-wing conspiracy. And we did meet, and we'd meet for 2 or 3 hours and plot and plan. It was a period of time when we'd reconvene in the evening with the same people in the morning, this time with the backbenchers, Newt Gingrich, Walker from Pennsylvania, Ben Weber, and others, and we began to strategize and develop the conservative movement. We, in essence, reverse engineered the left. We said they've got foundations, so we'll start our foundations. They've got single issue groups, we'll start single issue groups. They have political action committees, we'll start political action committees. And so we began to do that, and we also did something else that was very, very important. We looked to ourselves for leadership, and we pronounced these words, that we, the new right, the conservatives around this table and our friends around the country, we were the opposition to the Democrats and to Jimmy Carter. And it was not Bill Brock at the Republican National Committee. It was not Hugh Scott from Pennsylvania here. It was not Bob Dole. It was not Howard Baker. It was the conservatives. We were the alternative. And we designed the strategy that defeated much of Jimmy Carter's legislation, that defeated his appointments. And that came out of the meetings that we all began to have. And the point is, leadership does not start at the top or in any other place. It starts with each and every one of us. And no one ever appointed me to be a leader. No one ever knocked on my door. And no one's ever going to knock on your doors. You put yourself forward as the leader. But one of the issues that Republicans, conservatives have to come to grips with, some of us were talking about this earlier this evening, you need to come to the conclusion, what are you? Are you a Republican? Are you a conservative? Because too many people who think of themselves as conservatives are conflicted, and they really are Republicans. So Republicans now, have, in my opinion, have become an arm, an appendage of the Republican Party. So how's that working for you conservatives, to be an arm, an appendage of the Republican Party? I don't think very well, and I think that's something that we have to come to grips with. Are we going to be conservatives first, or are we going to be Republicans? And look at what it's achieved for us the last 10 years. I don't think it's working very well for us. I think it's important to realize that conservatives and conservatism did not lose in the 2006 election. It was big government Republicans. The Republicans in the last 10 years, it took over about 12 years ago, the Congress in 94. First year or two was a pretty good conservative revolution. But the last 10 years, they became that which they beheld. In the late 80s, early 90s, Newt Gingrich, Tom DeLay, others, Republican leaders, beheld the corruption, the immorality of the Democrats. And the voters agreed with them in 1994. Turned the Democrats out, put the Republicans in power. And within a couple of years, the Republicans became that which they beheld. They became corrupt. They became abusers of power. And I think the Republicans, to this day, are still conducting themselves in a very immoral, very corrupt way. Today's Bob Novak column across the country talks about how the Democrats and the Republicans are working together to protect earmarks. The Republicans, when they got to Washington in January of 2001, when they had everything, seemed to me to adopt a one-word strategy to govern. And that one-word strategy was bribery. You, the voters, have votes. We've got money. Let's talk. As a young Republican back in Houston in the late 50s, I heard my elders again talk about the balanced budget. Government's too big. We need to reduce it. We need lower taxes. We need less spending. We need to abolish this government agency. That one. I said, yeah, pretty good. Then I heard that again in the 60s, and the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. Come 2001, just kidding. Didn't really mean that. We just didn't want the Democrats spending the money. But now that we can spend the money, let's blow the bank vault doors off and spend, sort of say like fucking sailors, but that's not true. Drunken sailing their own money. As I said earlier, of all, we certainly need lots of things. We need more conservative organizations. We need more grassroots activists. We need more money to support our good campuses and our good organizations. We need more books, more publications. But number one above everything else is we need new leadership. And in my opinion, we are like the biblical Jews who had to wander through the desert for 40 years until that generation of immoral and corrupt leaders had passed from the scene. Then they could get to the promised land. And as conservatives, we're not going to get to the political promised land until we have new leaders. And our leaders, quite frankly, too many of them are corrupt and immoral. And it's not the corruption of a Duke Cunningham, of a Jack Abramoff, of a Bob Navy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the legal theft, the legal plunder of our children and our grandchildren's inheritance. It is immoral and corrupt to spend our children and our grandchildren's inheritance for the sole purpose of holding on to power.